Good morning, beautiful people. I'm Reverend Cristina Garza, and I'm so excited to talk to you today about this idea of collaboration and being a collaboration alchemist. And so, I will say we're going to do a little bit of a detour today. I know we did that last week. It was like Minister Unplugged. So this is Minister Unplugged part two. In part, because I had something prepared. And then I realized I didn't know that actually Nemo was going to be on with me this Sunday. And when I realized that, it seemed like an amazing time to actually embody collaboration. So today's actually going to be a little bit of a chat between Nemo and I in parts. And I really think that it's an amazing opportunity for us to also get some wisdom and some collaborative, spiritual juice from Nemo here this morning, because we have this amazing opportunity, right? So I will invite him later on to kind of just share with us some thoughts and as we kind of have more of a give and take here. But I'm going to first start up with just a little bit of a setup for everyone. So, the idea of collaboration is something for me that I've come to realize is really part of my, my DNA, my spiritual DNA. I started thinking about how collaboration shows up in my life and has shown up in my life. And I was thinking recently about how my father and actually my mother as well were so much a part of doing this in big and small ways. And one of the ways that I remember was through cooking. And so my father, when we were young, there are many times where, times were tough and food was scarce. And so he decided, oftentimes that he was going to be this master chef, this master alchemist. So, I'll give it a little bit of definitions. I'm going to pause for a second and say, we know alchemy many of us know alchemy to be something that is about, turning base metals into gold. And perhaps that's one element of this notion of alchemy that we've been taught or that we know of. But alchemy is really something much more powerful. Alchemy is an art and a craft and a spiritual practice that has its roots in so many ancient traditions in India, in China, in so many places in the world. And it's more than about this kind of scientific part, because much of our science is actually based on the predecessors of alchemists, but they were also spiritual practitioners. And so the idea of alchemy was to turn base things, common things, things that were seen by the world as not important, as not really part of anything, as lower than, as less than, and to make something beautiful out of it through this beautiful collaboration. And so that was part of the spiritual practice as well, about taking things in our lives, taking these things that were seemingly painful or hurtful or destructive or violent, and be able to transform them for our greater and highest good. So with that said, I had this time as a child where my father would take whatever was in the refrigerator and in the cabinet, and you would think, what is this man doing? And it looked gross sometimes, and you thought it was going to be gross, but with his creativity and with his love and with his passion, he would create these amazing meals. And so I remember that growing up, that I always loved this idea of bringing all of these weird things together and disparate things together and creating. My mother was the same way in the kitchen, but hers was a little bit more dainty and a little bit more refined, because she would actually have kind of a structure to her collaboration. So for example, she would love to make things like egg rolls, but she would put Mexican filling in there with chile and all kinds of other things. Or the reverse, she would make a Mexican dish and throw in non-traditional kind of spices and ingredients from another culture. So I remember that growing up, just loving that kind of idea. And as I grew up, I remember now thinking that, now Nemo here we have today, right? And he's known as a hip hop artist and in the new thought scene and a rapper. And, many of you know that that's kind of where my heart is too. I grew up as a rap and hip hop baby. And so for me, that was the beauty of having this moment where the art of hip hop and rap is about taking something, this thing that doesn't belong, this thing that might have been overshadowed, whether it's a lyric or a beat, which is basically just a rhythm or a melody, and then adding to it and kind of mixing genres and mixing things, and again creating this beautiful, alchemical, powerful thing that moves hearts and minds. And so I wanted to kind of just set the stage a little bit, kind of so that we can think about what all of this is. We're in a time right now where so much is happening. And so we see that all of these things don't belong, or all of these things are scary, or all of these things are threatening. And so I want us to get into a space of seeing that perhaps we can transform these things to our greatest and highest good. You know, there's a beautiful piece of scripture in Isaiah chapter 54:17 that says, "No weapon fashioned against me shall prosper." And so I say I've held on to that scripture. And so we know in Unity and in New Thought, the enemy is not about the out there. The enemy is right here in our mind. How do we transform our mind to be able to then address the material realm? You know, even Nemo's song, "We Shall Overcome," the song of the civil rights movement, "We shall overcome." It's holding on to that, the idea that no matter what is happening in the material realm, no matter what is happening around us, we have the power to set the course. We have the power to name and claim what it is that is happening to us. And we have that power to transform our lives and the lives of those around us. So I'm going to stop right there because I want to kind of pull in Nemo a little bit into the conversation, in particular because I was intrigued by his TED Talk. And if you all haven't seen his TED Talk, you definitely got to check it out. It's well worth your 15-20 minutes of time. So Nemo, in there, you know, you talked about part of this idea that of collaboration that I'm bringing forth is part of our prosperity series. So January is all about prosperity and how do we build prosperity in our lives and in the world around us. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit, kind of two things I'm really interested in. You know, one, how collaboration has shown up in your life and how that has really been part of your journey of spiritual enlightenment. And then the other thing is what you talked about in your TED Talk is also to this idea that you were spiritually impoverished before you kind of came into this notion of building this collaboration, even with yourself and your spiritual self. So that's a big terrain, I think, to kind of transverse. But just you know, whatever comes to you, I would really love to hear it.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. This is a beautiful message that you are bringing to our hearts of this idea of how much we have within us, and to not feel that sense of internal poverty amongst all of this craziness that's going on. And collaboration is a huge part of that. And I think collaboration in my life, I would say even more so over the last 10 years, has showed up through children. I really feel they have been my teachers. And having the chance to be uh, based in India at the Gandhi ashram, where Mahatma Gandhi had settled 100 years ago, and working with children from underprivileged communities, I actually came in, Christina, with this idea that I would come to help and I was going to come to fix. And I think this is one of the messages you're bringing to us, is that that's what I came to learn, is that I was the student. And each moment, I mean, when I'm working with children from these backgrounds and realize how much they're giving and how many smiles they offer, the love they offer, their families, what they try to give you from a material standpoint as well, even though they don't have much, it starts flipping my lens to the space of gratitude, to the space of I don't have room to complain, and I only have room to give, because if my children are teaching me this from their standpoint and their space of material discomfort or comfort, I have so much to keep learning. So I think that first step for me was like letting go of this barrier that I'm doing something, and surrendering to this process of relationship building with the children that I've been serving. I think that's been a huge part of a piece that has influenced kind of my journey forward. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I love what you said about kind of this idea that we have in our Western culture in particular, that there is a giver and there is a taker. And the giver is usually in the position of power, we assume, right? And that we're doing something out of our charity or out of our kindness. And I love that you kind of are bringing this idea that there is no dynamic of inequality when you are talking about hearts being opened and spiritual transformation, because we are all one, right? So that's idea that we're doing this together. And in American culture, we do have that in particular idea, right? We're giving and, oh, we're helping somebody, we're helping the poor. And in reality, if we think about what that does for our soul, what that does for us, it opens us up and creates this channel, this outpouring of love, of faith, of belief, of knowing that
Right.
is really our gift, right?
Exactly. Which expands us from thinking of capital as resources of only financial capital. Now we're saying, oh no, there is spiritual capital, there is emotional capital, there is joy capital. That all of these things are equal or more important than just the things that can buy us things. So that's what it opens. And I think one of the big things is when we start developing that lens of that this is my family, and these are not people I'm helping, this is my brother and my sister. I think that lens gets us more towards that space of equitable collaboration, where it's not a giver and a receiver, but it's kind of like we're working together and we're helping each other. I think that's such a beautiful point you bring up that we have to shift towards.
It's interesting, right? I'm sure in your spiritual journey, you're teaching and doing the things that you need for your own soul's journey, right? And so right now, Reverend Kurt and I are teaching a class on prosperity. And so for a while now, I've sort of been digging deep, going back to some of the teachings on prosperity and new thought and unity. And so I went back to Fillmore, Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, and read his prosperity book. And so it's so interesting to come years later with new eyes and a new perspective. And I've come to understand that even our founders really believed in this notion that nothing is ours. Because, like you said, we seem to think that, oh, I have this house, I have this bank account, I have this, a job, and that this is mine. And the reality is, nothing is ours. All of this is borrowed. We are all stewards of this substance. We are all stewards of this spiritual substance that we are supposed to share, not hoard, that we are supposed to give, and to be able to use to uplift humanity. I do want to share one quote, of Charles Fillmore, because this just blew my socks off, right? Got to put the reading glasses on, y'all. Sorry, it's that time. Um, Here's what he says in Prosperity. It is the duty of every Christian metaphysician to help in the solution of this problem. And the problem is, he's talking about inequity and hoarding and all of this other stuff. So the solution of this problem, by affirming that the universal spirit of supply is now becoming manifest as a distributing energy the world over, that all stored up, hoarded, vicious thoughts are being dissolved, and that all people have things in common, that no one lacks anything, and that the divine law of distribution, I love that, the divine law of distribution of infinite supply that Jesus demonstrated is now being made manifest through the world. And he goes on to say that, we need to sort of challenge ourselves and challenge this notion of what he calls the army of human dependence that we have created. And that to me is powerful. We kind of think about coming into this about, when we work with people who don't, quote unquote, have as much as we do, even from a spiritual perspective, right? I, as a spiritual leader, may work with others that are still coming into this, but into this. But
Right.
to kind of come at it is that we are all gifted. We are all teachers. We are all part of this miraculous process, this alchemical collaboration, of spirit and love that we're making together. We're baking,
Right.
we're cooking, we're stewing together.
I love the visual that you bring up when you talk about the power of distribution. This idea of the joy in giving, and when that equation starts happening in our blood, this idea that I find joy in serving and giving and helping, we see it. It's the law of nature that it comes right back to you in very unique ways that you can never measure. But it's just amazing to see that the pure intention always comes back and conspires to serve you in its own way. And I think that power of distribution is a beautiful phrase.
I want to shift a little bit because I definitely am curious. Last week, we in the chat and in the conversation that we had here at Unity North Shore, there was a lot of conversation about what's happening in the world today, right? And so there's also a lot of uncertainty, especially from New Thought folks, from Unity folks, about how do we stay in truth? How do we stay in principle and yet take a stand for this collaboration of life? How do we take a stand to be able to walk in faith and yet still be able to have a voice in what's happening? So I'm just curious, what would be your take on that, about staying in truth, but also being able to engage in the world? Because it seems like you've been doing that.
Well, no, it's a beautiful struggle, and that's the journey. That's the spiritual journey. I feel, right, is like that we're so imperfect, and we have our beliefs and we have our truths, and yet everybody has a different truth. And so the ultimate spirit of love is to also embrace the ideology that everybody has their own truth, that my truth is not superior. I believe in it, but I need to embrace the idea that others have their own truth. And if I respect man and if I respect this higher power, then I'm going to be respectful and develop those seeds of tolerance in my own heart. And I feel like what I've seen in my heart since I've been back in America and during this critical juncture over the last 8 months, I've seen myself been tested so many times. It's just even conversation with family about politics or what's going on and how obvious things are, but they are not that obvious. And so to believe what I believe in at a human value level and a humanity level is very clear, but I need to keep working on the capacity to open my heart and mind, to listen, to not speak, to embrace the ideology without judging, because that to me is the bigger step. That's the hard step. It's easy to believe in the truth of love. It's hard to practice love in the way that it accepts other beings when I don't agree with them. And so for me, in this day and age, in this time, moving in this transition as we start next week with new leadership in our country, I feel like my journey specifically for this year is to open, and I want to challenge myself to open my heart and mind to listen to those that I don't agree with and I don't believe in, and be open enough to at least listen. That's one small step for me that I need to take, a big step, sorry. you know
Yeah, definitely. And it's hard too, because I think oftentimes we're triggered, particularly from whatever standpoint we're coming from. I know myself as a person of color, I oftentimes, even just this week found myself being triggered and having to understand that what I was reacting to was actually not what was in front of me. Many of us, don't really think about even living in the northern city and living in Chicago. And my grandmother would tell stories about living in the south side of Chicago, and she couldn't play in the park as a little girl, that there were literally signs that said no dogs and Mexicans allowed. There was a time when before buses and trains, there were trolleys and the Mexicans had to sit in the back of the trolley. And there was a time she told a story all the time, one time, that her mother was pushed down because she had taken a seat. I mean, these are things that have been part of my own historical cultural heritage. So, oftentimes it's hard for us to see past that.
yeah
But part of the struggle, right, is that transformation that you talk about. And so that's where spirit is gnawing at our soul, like, okay, you're talking this. Now we really have to do it and we have to practice. And it's not easy, is it?
That's it. It's not, but you know what? that's where I'm going to grow. I know that. Otherwise, I'm just going to be the same person or deteriorate. But if I want to grow, I need to open my mind and heart. That's what I need to do. I need to keep doing that.
So the last thing I kind of want to just turn to before we go into meditation, you mentioned this idea of other forms of currency, and I love that you kind of flagged that for us, because and there are. And so we're on the eve of Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. We're on this really huge energetic time, because there's so much energetically around that when we think about love and positivity and nonviolence and peace and joy and hope. And so, in our country now, we're in a transition, in this stage of transition. And so, I invite everyone, if you haven't in a long time, to listen to or read or both Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech, because I think that is such a huge part of what can empower us, to empower us and guide us in this time. And I was kind of using that as a meditative piece last night. And one of the things that he talks about that I'd never kind of caught on is he talks about money and this idea of prosperity as spiritual currency,
Hmm.
and he says to remind us, that we are not impoverished, and the bank of justice is not insufficient, that the bank of justice is not bankrupt, that there's still something there for us to claim in this energetic power of what sufficiency is about. And so I invite everyone to kind of go into that.
Hmm.
And so, but the other part that I think is really important, I don't know if you all know anything about the history of the "I Have a Dream" speech, but it was actually something that was primarily written by one of his speech writers. And normally what would happen, he would have a speech writer, and then he would amend the text and he would do other things. And so he had been talking about this dream idea for some time throughout his talks and his speeches. And his advisors said to him, "You know what? That dream stuff is tired. Like, people have already heard it. We don't think you should include that." And he said, "Okay." So he took the speech and he reworked it a little bit. And the way they tell it is that he was not actually going to include that. And, part of what happened was there was people in the background, again, in this collaborative, energetic movement. And it was Mahalia Jackson, the gospel singer, who he often called on to literally called on her to sing to him at times when he was down, that he was raised. And Mahalia Jackson screams says to him in the background, "Tell him about your dream, tell him about your dream." And something just came over him, because he knew intuitively, Spirit was speaking, that was part of what his message was to this world. And so he just went impromptu, off topic, off speech, and started this thing of the dream. And I love that idea, because again, we see these things that are happening around us, and we forget that the dream is power. We forget that we are potentially sometimes living in a nightmare, and the dream is going to wake us up, like wake us up. And there's song even like about planting seeds. So what kind of what kind of is marinating for you when you think about all that good stuff?
I mean, somebody wrote in the comments, chills, like when you were sharing that. That is just powerful. The power of finding that we're saying capital is so focused on the material, and there's so much spiritual capital within us. It's just a matter of how we process our day. I loved it when Diane was sharing today that the spiritual is in doing the laundry. The spiritual is in texting your friend, and the spiritual is in our health. The spiritual is in our day-to-day mundane things. So how do we cultivate that lens to embody life in that way, such that, because I think Dr. King was doing that. And when he was able to embody life from that perspective of cultivating spiritual capital, is when he can share something like that, improvise and touch the world. And so I think it's all about the small things, Christina. I feel like that's where we develop the capital, to be present, to be aware, to stay connected, to give our love and that full energy. And that's where the joy and the gratitude and the feelings of contentment, all those things that we're actually looking for through material wealth, we actually receive when we start doing these small things, you know, and so that's what's coming up for me.
Amen. Thank you. Well, thank you for agreeing to play with me here today and like go off script and go unplugged and just have some fun and just vibe. And I really, really just adore you and love you. And thank you so much, Nemo. So I'm
Thank
going to
you.
just
Thank
close
you.
it off now. You know, I'm sure there's some goodies in the chat. And so I thank everyone, all of you, you know, for allowing us this space to just have this collaborative interchange. So you want to take us into a meditation song?
Well, I'm sitting here in silence, sending people smiles and realizing when we send out love, it keeps on rising. So I choose to close my eyelids to send positive vibes into every living being, from the ocean to the skies. And as I look at all the crisis, I realize that I just can send my love and prayers that will make it through this virus. To me, this is all priceless, to transform all the violence through sacrifice and trying, sitting on this cushion silent. May all beings be happy, peaceful and non-violent. May not one being suffer in their minds, even the tyrants. May all souls find alignment with their hands, their hearts and minds. And may all of us keep walking from ignorance to be wiser, like, ooh, ooh. Sending prayers out to you, sending prayers out to you. We're sending prayers out to you. Ooh, 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 ooh. We're sending prayers out to you. We're sending prayers out to you. We're sending prayers out to you.
As we take a minute and just take a couple deep, beautiful cleansing breaths, and just allow that breath to breathe us, that breath to remind us that it is innate, that it is natural, that it happens without our thinking, that it is a reminder of our connection to spirit. So we relax ourselves, and in this moment, we open up our minds, and we open up our hearts, and we open up our core to be able to give and to receive. And so we come into this sacred space, into this sacred circle, knowing and affirming that we are enough, that we have enough, and that collectively we already are enough to transform this world, that we have all within us to be able to do these things, both large and small, that call us to our spiritual purpose and call us to our spiritual power. And we remember here today that the dream is powerful, that we have been given the divine power of imagination, of creativity, to be able to know and source and resource the truth. And so we tap into that right here and now. And I invite all of you all to just vision for a moment, to imagine for a moment, to become Imagineers, to become alchemists, and to see and to feel and to know your dream. Allow yourself, your spirit, your guide, your God, energetic wisdom and knowing to just give you that gentle answer in this space. What is your dream? And as you feel that vibrating through every cell of your body, through every bone and every sinew and every organ, I invite you now to extend that out to a dream for the world. Because your dream is ultimately the world's dream. So in this space, what do you see for tomorrow? What do you see for the world? And I invite you to let go of lack. And I invite you to let go of insufficiency and corruption and decay and fear and immobilization and sleep and nightmares. I invite you to just let it all go, to let it wash away so that you are open. You are a clear vessel pouring out this light of God, pouring out this hope of God, pouring out this faith of God that allows you to power yourself to be the feet, to be the agents of the Spirit in this incarnation of life. And I want you to see that dream. I have a dream. I have a dream. We have a dream. What is that dream? And claim it. Claim it right now with the power of the Spirit, with the power of the knowing that you are the light of the world, that you have been sent here to do an amazing work, and that this is your journey right here and right now. You step into the dream. And we feel it and we know it, and it brings us joy and it lights us up, and we move forward as we wake from this meditation, as we wake from these fears, and we allow it to just settle and integrate into our soul. And so it is, and so we let it be. Amen.
Hey, thanks for watching this YouTube video. If Unity's message of positive spiritual living resonates with you, I hope you'll subscribe to our channel so you can stay up to date on other lessons as we post them. Also, if you're able to support us financially in the work that we do in the world, please check below for contact information. You can visit our website, find more about what programming we offer, as well as how to give. Blessings.